All right, let's do something a little more fun today. And let's talk about Season 4 potential gear, right? There's a lot of items that came from the previous seasons, from Season 1, 2, and 3 of Vault, Aberys, and Amir Jasil. And going into Season 4, we're not sure when the season is going to start, but I think it's fun to speculate what our gear might be. So, there is a lot of special or very rare or strong items that we're able to get. And let's start with the Voice of the Silent Star from Sarkareth. That'll be our cloak. I think Augury of the Primal Flame, based on how much damage it does, especially with Fury, is probably going to be a lock-in as well. And then we have, here's going to be the big Mongo pieces, right? These are pieces that you're probably going to have to spend a dinar on, especially this one here. The Seal of Diurna's Chosen. They did nerf this, but for a ring to have a damage effect on it, and it's versatility crit, whereas with our Season 2 set, we're probably going to want Haste Mastery instead. We're actually going to have so much secondary stat from these items that I don't necessarily think that we're not going to be able to hit our soft caps for what we want. So I think we're not only going to run Seal of Diurna's Chosen because we're going to be running our Firalath, which its dot effect will be able to proc the fire damage effect because it's Shadow Flame, so it's counted as fire. And on top of that, now we have a big Haste Mastery piece that's also very defensive for us in Seal of Finalial Duty. This one comes from Aranog. This one comes from Broodkeeper Diurna from the Vault raids. And these are both very good effects that come on both of these rings. Honestly, what's probably going to happen is I think there's a decent chance, if you're going to be raiding, that you have a chance at getting this item just as a drop. But this item is probably going to be so hotly contested that you might have to spend a dinar on it, is what my personal opinion is going to be. Because almost every class is going to have something that they can use to get fire damage to make this thing work and to make it good. Not to mention that we're probably going to want versatility as probably somewhere as our third, maybe fourth stat. I'm going to be going for versatility from a Mythic Plus perspective next season, so this ring still works very well for me. And then in our offhand, we have our Firalath, but our offhand being Ashkender, Fall of the Brotherhood from Aberys. Another special effect weapon that is incredibly strong, does more Shadow Flame damage, which can activate either of these rings. Has a very powerful effect, does double damage against humanoids, which is also very strong against certain bosses. And for our first Embellish slot, this one's a bit of a toss-up. This is the allied risk cards of Companionship, just having a plus versatility stat on a risk piece is going to be very good. Versatility scales well with this fire damage. I think because versatility increases the damage of Firalath, it also should increase the damage of Ashkender as well. We're not going to be running... we won't be running Annihilator with the Season 2 build, but I still think it's going to be quite good, and the additional stats we are going to be getting this from the stat budget we're getting for this for an embellishment slot is going to be very good. So that brings us to our little paint session here, right? The other thing extra that you'll see here that I put here as a potential is our second trinket slot, right? Because right now we have bracers, back, weapons, trinket, ring. Then we have to think about I'm not really thinking too much about the tier set, because 4 out of 5 of those slots are guaranteed going to be tier pieces, so we'll just pick whatever the best stats on those are, so I'm not really thinking about those. So realistically, we're probably looking at what necklace we could use. Our second trinket. I preliminarily here, when I was cooking this up, had Idol of Trampling Hooves that I originally brought in. This item actually got buffed pretty late in the season, and it ended up being one of our best in slot trinkets from Season 1. And the reason why I'm considering it is because it's a primary stat and not a secondary stat trinket. There are some very good secondary stat trinkets coming in. If we're getting Dragonflight Season 1, that means we also could potentially getting Puzzle Box. We could be getting There's also the Guzzler, or what people call the Guzzler from Vault of the Incarnates. Here, I'll pull it up here. The Grief Torch is also a potentially really good item. One of the reasons why I think Grief Torch might be picked over like uh, something like Beacon of the Beyond is mainly because Beacon of the Beyond is a plus mastery instead of plus primary stat, and we're already going to have so much secondary stat just from the sheer item level that we're going to have that I don't know if it's necessarily worth just having a plus mastery trinket. This is probably going to be something that's better for healers and tanks, I think, but for primary DPS specifically, I really think the Broodkeeper trinket Grief Torch is going to be very good for us. Also, Broodkeeper, the ring is there. But the Idol of Trampling Hooves was a very strong trinket. It is a passive trinket, which I personally prefer. But if we want to look at other dungeon trinkets that might be very big in Algathar Academy, there's the Puzzle Box, which give you a ton of mastery, which is good for Fury, but it's a 3-minute cooldown, so unless you're running things perfectly, it's not aligning. I don't like 3-minute cooldown trinkets. I just simply don't. There's nothing really special in Brackenhide or Halls of Infusion. This trinket falls off very quickly. Once again, it's also secondary stat. This trinket's just not very good in terms of tuning. You go to Ruby Life Pulls. There is a potential for the Ruby Whelp Shell. Because you can train the Whelp to do the single target burst, it actually ended up being pretty good for some classes later on. So for a trinket that's going to be just a damage trinket as a passive, it'd probably be, well, does it just do more damage than something like Idol of the Trampling Hooves? Then, well, maybe it'll be good. But personally, I think Idol might be just a pretty good pick in there for us. When you look through here, there's nothing ever special. Homeland Raid Horn isn't very good. There's the Haste Trinket, and then once again another 3-minute from Dawn of the Infinite. I don't really think these are going to be something on our radar. It's possible that Accelerating Sandglass ends up being good for us in case we want to go something more like for like Mythic Plus, if we go like Mastery Verse, which we're kind of at now, and use trinkets like Accelerating Sandglass to really bridge that gap of needing haste, it's possible that it could be pretty good for us in that situation, but this is kind of where I'm sitting as far as our loot drops here. But then let's think about the necklace, right? Because we want to think about secondary stats. And there's a couple ways we could go. From the current raid tier, we have a lot of if we want a lot of versatility, there's the Volacross neck, which the fire damage absorb and nature damage absorb, I've had it work a little bit, and it's not like it's bad, it's just a little something extra on there. But to note, it is going to be a very rare item, meaning that it will be a higher item level than everything else that will be dropping, although it is top of the myth track, so I don't think it's going to be too crazy. Another thing to consider from this tier as well is the Eye of Flame, which is a huge mastery trinket, which if you look at what we have already, crit haste, crit haste, crit haste, crit some mastery, big mastery haste, versatility crit, we might need this necklace in terms of having big mastery, like a real mastery sync item, to really get our mastery up to the soft cap that we want at 5,600. So this is a very good potential in terms of our necklace, is what I'm considering. We're obviously, I think these two rings will beat out any crafted rings that we could get, and I know that, I don't know how it works. Supposedly, people are assuming that we're going to be able to upgrade the legendaries, so Evokers will have their upgraded legendary, and then Fearlath will also be upgraded to appropriate eye level in a Fated season. I don't know if that's going to be true or that's the case, but I'm just kind of assuming that we'll have something like that, right? But mainly we're looking here with the slots we have, right, of second embellishment. We're looking at second embellishment and potentially what stats, because the helm, shoulders, chest, legs, and glove slots are just going to be whatever stats are best based on what they give us, right? And then you can maybe have one offset coming from the dungeon pieces. But the secondary item that we can get for our embellishment slot is going to be very important. And we have a couple options. I don't really think blue silken lining is going to be too good for us, because especially in raid, we're going to be taking damage, we're going to be dropping lower. It's more mastery, but I don't really think we're going to need that much more mastery with if we pick up something like Eye of the Flame from Tendril. It's possible that we just, like we have now, just stick with Shadow Flame. Maybe that's something that's just going to be good. Something that's actually interesting is if you go, here, we'll go back to Wowhead here, is the Allied Chest Guard. It is a plate verse mastery, so this is actually stats that we want. And it can buff your allies with versatility, which something might be really good for Mythic Plus. So maybe we'll go Helm, Shoulders, Gloves, Legs, and then run something like this as our second embellishment slot, potentially, for Mythic Plus. Maybe we'll run, instead of that, there are the Frostfire Legs, which give us the Haste proc, which are probably also going to be pretty good. They're also primary Haste Mastery. Which might be something like, depending on the stats of the tier legs that we have, this might be another good choice, especially for Mythic Plus. So we actually have a lot of options here, and I think it's really kind of interesting to see what we could potentially use. Because there are other options, especially for trinkets, right? If we look back at Vault of the Incarnates, one of the biggest trinkets there was from Primal Council and the Whispering Incarnate icon. This might be good because it's just, we're going to get its primary stat, its crit. I don't think we're going to cap out on crit, so that crit will still be valuable. It's going to give us that crit value to other players, and then I think the other stats we get are like Verse and Mastery. If other people are using it, which might be really good. But I just don't know how well secondaries are going to really scale, or how good they're going to be for us when we have so much of them already. So we have a trinket like this. I do not think that the I'll move this over to C4 Warrior. I do not think Rumbling Ruby is going to be any good for us. It wasn't that great in previous seasons. It wasn't that great before. For survivability, Decoration of Flame is kind of interesting because it's primary stat and it gives you a shield. But when we're considering a shield trinket, we can more look at something like the Fire Act Tank trinket, right? Because that thing is crazy. This thing is going to have 1 billion health, and if next season continues to also be just dealing with one shots all the time, unless they really cook something, this thing might also be something you spend a dinar on if it's also hotly contested, right? So we have this trinket. It's also possible in certain situations. Cataclysmic Signet Brand is pretty good. We also have from last season in Abris, we had the Elemental Pocket Anvil. I'm not personally a fan of these like ramping trinkets. I think they're fine. I think they're okay in the game. But if I want a trinket, I want it to be good all the time. If you've ever used something like Pocket Anvil, or you use something like the Cataclysmic Signet Brand in Mythic Plus, it'll do far less damage than what you're realistically expecting it to do, just because it requires that ramp time to just do the damage. Chromatic Essence is a maybe, but even then, I think one of the problems with it is, once again, it's just more secondary stat. I don't think we're going to need more secondary stat. I think we're going to be looking for primary stat trinkets that just do damage. I mean, this is something that's also potentially interesting, especially if you need to have that kind of shield protection, because you can just put a shield on yourself, right? It doesn't really have a lot of offensive value, but I think it has a decent amount of actual potential. But realistically, we're there to do damage, right? So for my money, we're mainly looking at the Idol of the Trampled Hooves of the trinkets that we might get from Mythic Plus. And hopefully they cook next season and give us an item that allows us to upgrade Mythic Plus items to the Myth track. Because even on my Warrior, I have done full vaults every single week of Mythic Plus, and I I have never seen a Mind of the Ocean. It's the one trinket that I would want from Mythic Plus at Myth Track, and I just can't get it. But I thought this video was just kind of fun to potentially look ahead at Season 4. And what do you guys think, right? Do you think that we're going to have, that we might use even something as weird as the Dathia neck? Like maybe we're going to be starving ourselves of haste somehow, and we're going to be running, oh, we need the Dathia neck. We're going to have Giga haste, right? I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what we're going to be running with or what we're going to need. But I think it'll be interesting. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Having all of these special items together is going to have a ton of power. And are there any that you in particular like, right? Let me know what you think. But that's kind of all I had and all I wanted to talk about. I just thought it was fun to kind of speculate on what we might be running next season, as Fury at least. As Arms, obviously not Ashkander, but even as Arms, I still think that there's going to be a case for running Seal of Final Duty and Seal of Diana and Seal of Diana's Chosen, because they're just so strong. And I do wonder if when these come back in circulation, if they're going to be rebuffed to their old state, or they will keep their nerf state, where they got nerfed so they weren't taken into the next season, because it was a DPS gain to use old rings for some classes like tanks, right? But yeah. Anyway, I want to have fun talking about this crap, and I want to hear your ideas. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.